Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Treehouse. So, today we are once more going to be getting somewhat political in regards to the Israel and Palestine conflict, as well as discussing anti Semitism within the pro Palestinian movement and in general, um, particularly from a leftist perspective. So, today I actually have an example. So I'm going to be discussing a particular post that I came across that I wound up responding to. And I'm going to be focusing in particular on something called Holocaust inversion. So, Holocaust inversion is a form of anti Semitism that occurs when people compare various activities of the Jews to being Nazis, calling Jews Nazis, saying that Israel is not like Nazi Germany, defacing Holocaust memorials, and things like that. So, personally, I tend to believe that Holocaust inversion is essentially one of the most harmful forms of anti Semitism that there is. Outside of physically hurting Jewish people. The reason is because this is something that is our one of our most profound intergenerational traumas. It killed a majority of the Jewish population and leaving only around 14 million Jews left. 6 million were killed, 11 in total, including the Romani, who also have a similar circumstance to us, wherein they are diaspora people. They've been exiled, um, and they mostly are treated to a lot of um, dislike and distrust and hatred and anti-Romani sentiment. So in my opinion, um, we can see this most particularly within the International Court of Justice case against Israel for genocide. Uh, I do believe that the ICJ case is a form of Holocaust inversion that is profoundly normalized in our day to day. And this is being done by South Africa, who are notoriously anti Semitic and have been for generations. And they're known for their rather extreme anti Semitic cultural norms. So this is not surprising that this came from them. And just recently, a university student from South Africa created an art project where she vandalized a memorial that stated 6 million Jews were murdered. She crossed out the 6 million and Jews and replaced it with 38,000 and Gazans. There are not even 6 million Gazans living in Gaza. Can you imagine the absolute narcissism and entitlement of crossing out 6 million and replacing it with 38,000? Do you even know how many civilians died during the Iraq War? The excess deaths are listed at over a million. The Gaza death toll is barely a quarter of that, and yet Israel is accused of genocide while America was not. So either we need to change the definition of genocide to simply mean lots of people being killed, regardless of intention, or we need to acknowledge that Israel's actions do not rise to the current definition of genocide, and we have very little evidence to suggest that they do. Does this mean we will never find evidence of this? No, we could find it. Does this mean Israel will never cross the red line into genocide? No, they could, but they haven't, and we haven't found it. Does this mean that Ben Gvir and Smotrich aren't spewing genocidal rhetoric? No, they are. But that isn't genocide, it's speech. People are going around now saying that the ICJ found proof of genocide. They haven't. The ICJ did not make any type of ruling whatsoever. If you read the actual court transcripts, you will see that the ICJ merely determined prima facie that South Africa has the right to accuse Israel of genocide and that the ICJ has jurisdiction to hear their case and form a judgment based on their jurisdiction. They also told Hamas to free the hostages. So this is a ruling that they've already made. It was made toward Hamas. So if we're going by the ICJ, Hamas has obviously completely disregarded this command. So you cannot tell me that you support the ICJ proceedings without also agreeing with what the ICJ told Hamas to do. And they didn't do it. In fact, they executed 6 hostages just for pure sadistic glee. Accusing Israel of genocide is a type of schadenfreude at being able to invert the Holocaust and be like, those silly Jews, I can't believe that they're now the Nazis, as though they are comic book villains with an origin arc. By the way, as an X-Men connoisseur, shall we say, this is an extremely common fandom interpretation of Magneto, and people love making this comparison with him, a literal Jewish Holocaust survivor. You can tell that there's a certain amount of smug satisfaction with these people, that they no longer have to care about the Holocaust, since, look, the Jews are now doing a Holocaust, and that Jews no longer have any standing with which to discuss our marginalization. Obviously, this comes from a place of resentment, that it was not culturally acceptable to hate Jews, so they had to keep quiet, but now all of a sudden they can speak their minds. And that means that now more than ever, people feel emboldened to be virulently anti Semitic with relatively little pushback. And unfortunately, this is the standard mindset of most liberal pro Palestinians and anti Zionists, and it is rather crazy making. And it sucks because being pro Palestinian has been co opted by virulent anti Semites who make actual TikToks reading out Osama bin Laden's letter to America whilst cheering on the actually, literally genocidal Houthis for blocking a cargo ship. Then they'll turn around and accuse random Israeli civilians of being genocidal colonialists in their own homeland. They accuse Jews of being genocidal because less than a quarter of the total civilian population the USA murdered in Iraq, without ever calling the Iraq War a genocide. And then in the very next post, a bunch of red triangle and watermelon emojis praising the Houthis, who expelled the entire Jewish population of Yemen, every last Jew but one, who was put in jail, and presided over an actual genocide, killing more than 200,000 people. Again, the death toll in Gaza is about a quarter of this. And it sucks because, I consider myself to be a pro-Palestinian Zionist. I believe the West Bank in some areas is an occupation according to international law. I disagree with the extremist Kahanist settler violence against Palestinians living in places like Hebron, where they had to build a net above their streets so that they could catch all the trash and piss and shit Israelis literally throw onto them. I support Palestinian sovereignty in Gaza and the West Bank, and I believe that Palestine should be a country as much as Israel should be a country. I deeply oppose Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and all the other Irgun terrorist fuckhead war criminals in power. The use of the Lavender AI system without human verification is a war crime. So Lavender is what they're using to target Hamas members in Gaza and essentially blow them up. And unfortunately, they use an AI that cross-references all the different social media posts, cell phone footage, cell phone usage, camera footage, things like that. Anything that they leave a trail, like banking, anything like that. It cross-references all of this and then spits out a bunch of names. And what they should be doing is checking each one of those names to make sure that this person is actually in Hamas, because there are a lot of mistakes that they make, that it makes. Since it's an AI, it's imperfect. They could call somebody a Hamas member simply because they have a cell phone number associated with an old Hamas member, but they just recycle the cell phone number and it's somebody else totally different. The AI says, yeah, that guy is a terrorist, and the IDF does not actually check this information. They simply press the button to blow the guy up, and they specifically target people in their houses while they're home with their families. So they knowingly and intentionally are killing not only the Hamas member, but also like their family. And that is a war crime. It isn't genocide. It is a war crime and it is reprehensible, but it is not genocide. Genocide has a very specific legal meaning, and this does not rise to the level of genocide. You cannot claim that something is genocide based on vibes or based on how it makes you feel. Genocide has a specific legal terminology, which is the intentional extermination of a people simply for being a part of that group of people. So, in order to rise to genocide, we would have to prove that Israel is specifically targeting Palestinians for no other reason than that they're Palestinian and is indiscriminately killing every single Palestinian that they come across. And that is not happening. It isn't. The death toll is at like 48,000 and it's been a year. That is not happening. Like I've mentioned, there is a death toll. There's death tolls in the 200,000, 300,000, 1 million, and those aren't genocides. Well, the Houthis, that was a genocide. But in America, that wasn't a genocide. Um, in We're talking about Russia, you know, we don't even use the word genocide for Russia. So it is a double standard, and that double standard is Holocaust inversion and it's anti-Semitic. So, you know, and even though I do believe that they are killing lots of Palestinian civilians and they're holding Palestinian kids in prison without a trial, there is a lot that we can actually criticize the Israeli government for doing, which we have real evidence and real legal precedent to support our claims. We do not need to make shit up. We don't. We already have plenty of shit that we could use against them if we wanted to. And it sucks because I can't call myself pro-Palestinian because I believe that Israel should be a country and that Jews have the right to live there. But I can't call myself a pro-Palestinian because then I will be immediately associated to terrorist sympathizers who want to annihilate Jews in Israel from the river to the sea, often without even being able to name from what river to what motherfucking sea. The most ironic part of this ICJ case is definitely that Hamas is pretending like the ICJ case has legitimacy despite one, South Africa demanding more time to find evidence of genocide since they literally have none, and two, that we are expected to believe that Hamas is engaging with the ICJ in good faith when they've already refused to listen to a ruling the ICJ have already made and actually completely and totally laughed in their face by not only not releasing the hostages, but by actually executing 6 of them. It was a big fuck you to any type of international law. So why are we pretending like Hamas wants a seat at the table when the only time that they're cooperating is to encourage the ICJ to legitimize their anti-Semitic blood libel? If the ICJ ever did rule that Israel is committing a genocide, of course Hamas will cheer and support this. But when the ICJ told them to release the hostages, they spit in their face. They don't get to come back and say, see, the ICJ ruled it's genocidal. Either you fucking abide by international law or you don't. You do not get to take civilian hostages, operate inside hospitals and schools, openly advocate for perfidy and a hudna, and then turn around and cry about Geneva Convention violations. Because guess what? People say that they started it is not an acceptable excuse to violate the Geneva Convention, when in fact it is literally the only legal defense against Geneva Convention violations, since using these places as operating bases turns them into valid military targets not protected by the Geneva Convention. So this is also going to be dealing with there's other examples of this as well. And people, even when Israel does do targeted attacks, people still accuse them of genocide, like completely with baseless accusations. They said the same thing at Jenin and Ibn Sina when the IDF dressed up as doctors and went through the hospital to assassinate terrorists who were actively planning another October 7th style massacre without killing a single civilian. And everyone was like, oh my god, you violated the Geneva Convention. Oh my god, you dressed up as a doctor. Which, by the way, no, they didn't. Hamas used the hospital as a military installation, ergo, it was a completely valid military target, you fucking imbeciles. You cry about Geneva Convention violations when Hamas is taking civilian hostages, firing 20,000 rockets per year, every year for the last 20 years into Israeli residential zones for the sole purpose of targeting Israeli civilians and especially children and hospitals. And now you guys want to bitch and fucking complain about the Geneva Convention. Hamas violated first, and guess what? That means that you are no longer protected against being targeted by the IDF. So cry more for your shitty, stupid terrorists. You cannot use human shields as an attempt to insulate yourself from being targeted and expect that you will be protected by the Geneva Convention. Israel has every legal right to fire upon you, even if you were holding a baby in front of you. You killed that baby. You put that baby in front of you. You are a disgusting terrorist piece of shit who is using children, who is calling upon children to be soldiers and fucking martyrs. If you force Israel to violate the Geneva Convention to assassinate you before you perpetrate more attacks on babies, old people, peaceniks who have been your companions for 20 years, kindergarten students, by hiding in a god fucking forsaken hospital to protect the enemy's civilians while doing so, guess what? That is not a Geneva Convention violation, you fucking morons. And I'm gonna do a little bit of self disclosure. Once again, this is something that I try not to go into too much detail about, but I actually was used as a human shield once. I was 8 years old. I was involved in a drug deal between two adults, and guns came out. And the guy that I was with grabbed me and restrained me in front of him, and I was a pretty fucked up kid. I had no real like I had inhibited RAD, so I didn't have any really emotions. All I could remember thinking is I'm really short, and that guy could just shoot K, the guy's first letter of his name, in the head, like nonsense because my brain couldn't comprehend what was happening. But anyway, I digress. And if I had been shot and killed, do you know who is responsible for me dying? K is. K is responsible. He took me and he put me in that position. He killed me because he's the one who also has a gun and is threatening. He's the one who put that kid in front of him. All right, so I know that was a little bit heavy, and I'm going to keep going here with my example that I have. So let's see. All right, just let me find this here. Just want to make sure that I have every bit of this so that I'm not spending all this time. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is a Tumblr post by a particularly anti-Semitic, a rather virulently anti-Semitic Tumblr blogger named Ash Wants a Free Palestine. And already we can see that there is plenty of Holocaust inversion straight from the biography itself, saying that every Zionist is a Nazi. So in this particular post, Ash posts a video that is Israeli children harassing a Palestinian family. And they have a translation of the words, and they're just a bunch of like little kids, like little Israeli kids that are kind of throwing pebbles at a Palestinian family. I presume it's in the West Bank. And what they said was, cook them, let's cook them, come here, come. And the Israeli soldier said, stop recording, leave, shut up and leave, stop talking. The Palestinian family says they're recording too, and the soldier says, I'm telling you, stop recording. And the Israeli children say, let's make them taste defeat. And Ash says, this is disgusting behavior. No one is born a racist. No one is born a Zionist. These children's hatred is not their own. They were taught it. They are being used. All right, so already I have a problem with most of this. And by most, I mean all of it. One thing I will say is that I can obviously tell that the way that the IDF soldier was engaging with these people, there was already a degree of unfairness because he told the Palestinians to stop recording, but the Palestinian said that the kids were recording too, and he did not tell the children to stop recording. So this is kind of like a shitty little like power trip, like, like the way every police officer is, kind of like just these little unfair moments. And it wasn't fair. And I mean, what the kids were doing was obviously shitty. Um, but here's where I have a problem with this. Ash Wants a Free Palestine is a grown up who is going after literal children who are constantly being bombarded with terrorist attacks, bomb threats, news articles, having to go into bomb shelters and panic rooms, having constant rocket attacks, having constant rocket alerts on their phones, never knowing when the next rocket is going to hit, never knowing if their family is going to wake up the next day. It's the same shit that people say that the Palestinians are going through. The Israelis are going through this shit too, you know. The only difference is that Israel is just better at war than Hamas is. That's the only difference. Hamas does not have the ability to do what they really want to do in Israel because Israel is just better at it than they are. But if they didn't have the capacity to protect their civilians, they would all be dead. And the children are growing up knowing that, someday the Iron Dome might fail and Iran might send 2,000 rockets and the Iron Dome won't be able to get them all, and they'll lose their friends, their family. Like they're growing up with this constant awareness that at any given moment, everything that they know could be completely obliterated. Not only that, but they are dealing with the prospect that at the age of 18, they will be forced to fight in this conflict. They will be conscripted. If they don't go into the army, they will go to prison. And so most of them choose to be conscripted. Because if you go to prison, then your life is kind of fucked, right? If you're a felon, like you can't like get a good job, like shit like that. So my issue is that this person is plastering a child's face on this poster of their insidiously anti-Semitic fucking movement as a justification for why it's okay for her to promote essentially Hamas propaganda. This whole entire blog is just full of this racist, virulent anti-Semitism, calling Jews Nazis over and over and over again. And what I particularly have a problem with is, once again, the double standard, because she's targeting Israeli children, saying that Israeli children are being taught to hate Palestinians. Do you know what Palestinian children say about Israeli children? Do you know what the Palestinian Sesame Street teaches the Palestinian kids? Here is a prime example. All right. There is a children's show on Al Aqsa TV, which is the official Hamas-run television channel broadcasting from Gaza. They broadcast a segment for the mass killing of Jews. This is from the Times of Israel argument that I'm just reading out here, the Times of Israel article that I'm just reading out here. So this is not my words. This is the Times of Israel's words. In a clip of the kids' TV show, The Pioneers of Tomorrow, broadcast on May 2nd and uploaded Thursday by the Memory Media Watchdog, the host of the program is a young girl in a hijab interviewing two very young children, one of whom she says she hopes to be a police officer like her uncle Ahmad. The host asked what policemen do, and after establishing that they catch criminals, he adds, "They shoot Jews, right?" And stresses to her young guest that you want to be like him. You want to be a police officer and shoot Jews. And the little kid says, "I will shoot the Jews." And the host says, "All of them?" "Yes," the girl said. "Good," the host answers. In a previous segment, a co-host of the show, which is an anthropomorphic B character, talks on the phone with a child in the West Bank Jenin refugee camp and encourages him, if Jews come into the camp, to punch them and turn their faces into tomatoes in order to liberate Palestine. The bee also tells the child caller to beat them up, to pick a stone, and when the Jews come, take it and throw it. The Pioneers of Tomorrow, a children's program with a Sesame Street like format of live actors interacting with puppets and humans in animal costumes, has repeatedly come under fire for violent, anti Semitic, and anti Western themes, and is often presented to children as young as 3 or 4. In one segment extensively reported on in Western and Hebrew media, a Mickey Mouse like character who routinely espouses the beliefs of militant radical Islam is eventually beaten to death by Israeli soldiers after he attempts to liberate Tel Aviv. Now, already, this is a lie, because what they're saying is that they need to liberate Tel Aviv because it's being occupied by Israel and it's been stolen from the Palestinians, when in reality, Tel Aviv, it was entirely built from the ground up in like the 20s solely by Jews in completely uninhabited land. And that city was not there 100 years ago. So they're claiming that the Jews came in and kicked Arabs out of Tel Aviv. That is completely and utterly false. And there are many other cities in Israel that are the same. Netanya, Holon, they're the same. They were built from the ground up by Jews in uninhabited areas. So, to go back to the article, other animal characters on the show have met a similar fate. So that was the end of the article. Okay, so that's just one example. We also have other examples that I would like to show you. And I wonder if this lady knows how much hateful, disgusting, horrifying rhetoric that Hamas adults say about Israel and Palestine. All right, so let's actually talk about that. Let's actually look and see what the adults say. All right, so Sheikh Hamad al-Regeb, who is a Hamas official, he says, bring annihilation upon the Jews, paralyze them, destroy their entity. Yahya Sinwar, who, by the way, Israel saved his life. He was imprisoned and he had a brain tumor, and Israel actually saved him. He would have died. And they then released him in an exchange, a prisoner for hostage exchange, because Hamas had taken a hostage before who they had captured, Gilad Shalit, and they wanted 1,000 of the prisoners that Israel had, most of whom were terrorists, like Sinwar. And Sinwar got released in that deal, and as a thank you for both being released and having his life saved, he planned October 7th and killed 1,500 people, 12 to 1,500 people. So, yeah, you're fucking welcome. He says, we'll take down the border with Israel and tear out their hearts from their bodies. Awesome. Ahmad Bar is the former deputy speaker of the Hamas parliament. He says, kill them all without leaving a single one. Fathi Hamad, a senior Hamas official, says, you have Jews everywhere and we must attack every Jew on the globe by way of slaughter and killing. Awesome. Sinwar says, now Hamas will discuss when we will wipe out Israel. Fathi Hamad says, we must attack every Jew on planet Earth. We must slaughter and kill them. Marwan Abu Ras, a Hamas official, says, Jews are the vilest and most despicable nation in history. Sheikh Hamad al-Regeb says, oh Allah, bring annihilation upon the Jews. And Mahmoud al-Zahar, the Hamas co-founder, says, when we talk about peaceful resistance, we are deceiving the public. Musa Abu Marzouk, a senior Hamas leader, says Israel will come to an end just as it began. The day will come when people ask, where did Israel go? Fathi Hamad, a senior Hamas official, says, for the Palestinian people, death has become an industry. This is why they have formed human shields of the women, the children, the elderly, the Mujahideen, in order to challenge the Zionist bombing machine. It is as if they were saying to the Zionist enemy, we desire death like you desire life. Ali Baraka, a senior Hamas official, says the Israelis are known to love life. We, on the other hand, sacrifice ourselves. We consider our dead to be martyrs. And another Hamas official says Hamas has just one no to the existence of Israel. And Ismail Hania He was recently assassinated in Iran, said, "We will not recognize Israel. Palestine must stretch from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea." And Saleh al-Rui said he wanted total war with Israel. "Therefore, we are convinced that if a total conflict begins, the airspace and seaports of this entity will be shut down, and they will not be able to live without electricity, water, and communications." And Ahmad al-Hadi said that a ceasefire is part of Hamas's overall strategy, but said that Hamas has plans for the next step after a ceasefire, which is that they plan to violate the ceasefire. He also stated that October 7th had achieved its intended purpose of landing a blow to the normalization of relations between Israel and other Arab countries. And of course, we have Ghazi Hamad, who says Israel is a country that has no place on our land. He vowed to repeat the October 7th attacks again and again until Israel is annihilated, and expressed a desire to sacrifice martyrs, which is Gazan civilians, for Hamas's ideological aim of destroying Israel. And Khaled Mashal said, "No nation is liberated without sacrifices. In all wars, there are civilian victims. We're not responsible for them." And Ismail Hania said one of my favorite, and by favorite, I just mean it's the most telling quote, which is, "The blood of the women, children, and elderly, we are the ones who need this blood, so it awakens within us the revolutionary spirit." So I want this person to go ahead and tell me how they defend that and how they square that away with their support of Hamas. I wonder, do they support this stuff? Do they agree with this stuff? Because it sounds like they do. Do they agree that Hamas is justified spilling the blood of women, children, elderly people to awaken their revolutionary spirit? You fucking dumbass. We can go back and forth demonstrating hateful extremist rhetoric on both sides, but guess what? Not a single bit of it is fucking relevant to whether or not Israel and Palestine deserve to exist as distinct sovereign nations. Palestine deserves to be a country within Gaza and the West Bank, and Israel deserves to be a country within the rest of Israel. And this blog is full of extremist, disgusting, anti-Semitic blood libel and support of Hamas killing civilians, and they want to turn around and show us a bunch of children who are traumatized by Hamas's actions as a justification for that. And they called me a baby killer. So I said to them, I say to them, rather, this person blocked me after they called me a baby killer, so I decided I would take it to the streets of YouTube, I suppose. Um, as opposed to them, they support murdering babies and infants and the murder and kidnapping of Jewish babies. Kfir Bibas is a baby, dipshit. I don't see you giving a fuck. You're the one that's parading around traumatized children on your blog in order to spur your audience and harassing and cajoling them. You dehumanize Israeli kids and support killing them, yet you expect us to believe that you give a shit about babies and children. You don't give a shit about Palestinian babies. You don't give a shit about children in Palestine or Israel. If you gave a shit about Palestinian babies, you wouldn't prop up Hamas, an organization that has egregiously harmed Palestinian babies, on top of many other Palestinians like LGBT and women over the last 20 years. So I recommend you go back to simping for the IRGC, an organization that has colonized Iran, oppressed Iranian kids, killed Israeli kids. Go back to simping for the Houthis, who genocided 200,000 people in Yemen and ethnically cleansed the entire Jewish population of Yemen. You are a baby killer sympathizer, since you are literally supporting terrorists who openly tell you that they want the blood of Jewish babies to inspire their revolutionary spirit, and not a single response to any of it. Just a shitty, stupid little picture and a trollish one-off comment. Not a single person of sane moral fiber takes you seriously. And of course, hang on here. I wrote the rest of this as like a kind of script. All right, just say Jews like you mean. Don't fucking prevaricate behind Zionist. You racist colonialist shitheads once more have co opted and stolen our words. Now you try to tell us what it means. You don't get to use the word Zionist. You have no idea what it means. A Zionist is someone who supports indigenous rights and believes that Jews have the right to live in their homeland safely. That's it. By claiming it means literally anything else, like baby killer, you are demonstrating that you are anti Semitic. You hate Jews, so just say Jews, you fucking cowards. Calling random Jews you see a Nazi because they oppose you bullying children instead of recognizing that they are kids who deserve compassion, you know, all those children that you claim to give a fuck about, is Holocaust inversion, which is knowingly intended to mock Jews about their worst intergenerational trauma. You don't know shit about me, and you automatically jump to calling me a Nazi and a baby killer. That makes you a Nazi, dipshit. You are spewing literal Nazi propaganda. You can be so brave on Tumblr.com with your pretend fucking apathy. Here, I'll reply for you. Shut up. I am a Nazi, and I do not know how to read. A perfect example of the kind of people that I talk about on this blog for all of those out there claiming that the pro-Palestinian movement is largely reasonable and they're anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic. These are the same people who harass random Jews they see in the street and fucking support throwing Molotovs at synagogues. So, you know. All right. Well, anyway, good luck and have a great day, I suppose. The end.